Hi everyone, welcome to my channel, where we discuss all things films. Today we're going to talk about spring, summer, fall, winter, and spring, written and directed by Kim Ki-duk, released in 2003. This film takes place on and around a floating temple, following the life of an old monk and a young monk. I am going to talk about some major plot points, so if you haven't seen the film yet, I suggest coming back to this video after you've done so. So, without further ado, let's get into it. First and foremost, it is important to talk about the Wheel of Life. The Wheel of Life is one of the most common subjects in Buddhist art. It depicts the Buddhist idea of Lunhui, which is the endless cycle of birth, death, and rebirth. This idea of the material world being bound in an endless cycle is represented by the setting of the movie, where we see the mountains surrounding the lake, which surrounds the temple, and within the temple we see a circular bowl with fish surrounding a statue of the Buddha. The structure of the movie is symbolic in that it reflects the Four Kalpas in Buddhist cosmology. The Four Kalpas are the 4 stages the world undergoes. Spring is symbolic of formation, summer of continuance, autumn of decline, and winter of disintegration. Next, let's talk about the 3 poisons. In Buddhism, there are 3 fundamental evils inherent in life that give rise to human suffering. They are identified as greed, anger, and foolishness, each represented by an animal: rooster for greed, snake for anger, and pig for foolishness. The 3 poisons are regarded as the source of all illusions and earthly desires. They prevent people from turning their hearts and minds to goodness. The 3 poisons are depicted through 3 separate incidents that occur in the film. Foolishness is when the boy ties rocks to little animals for self-amusement, ignorant to the consequences these actions may cause. Greed is when the teenage monk leaves the temple in order to pursue his desire for the girl. This is especially clear since the animal representation of greed, the rooster, also appears in this segment. Anger is when the adult monk kills his wife because of her infidelity and betrayal. There are 2 common variations of the depiction of the 3 poisons. In one version, we see the 3 animals form a circle, whilst the other shows the snake and the rooster coming out of the mouth of the pig. This is because it is believed that foolishness is the poison that gives rise to the other, which may explain why foolishness is the first poison to be shown in spring through the actions of the boy monk. Then there are the 8 kinds of universal sufferings identified in Buddhism. Birth, represented by the young monk. Aging, represented by the old monk. Sickness, represented by the girl. Death, represented multiple times throughout the film. Then there's the suffering of having to part from those whom one loves, represented by the girl's departure from the temple, as well as the parting between the mother and the baby. The suffering of having to meet with those whom one hates, represented by the policemen who find the adult monk at the temple. The suffering of being unable to obtain what one desires, represented by the adult monk's love and desire for his wife, which he was denied as she ran off with another man. And lastly, the suffering arising from the 5 components that constitute one's body and mind. This suffering speaks of our physical body and our mind being a source of suffering in of itself, for we would not experience any sort of suffering at all if we did not occupy this physical body. Therefore, this last suffering is represented by the entirety of the film. It is worth noting that different animals appear throughout the movie. Apart from the rooster, which clearly symbolizes greed, it is difficult to pinpoint exactly what each are symbolic of or is intended to represent. I would love to hear your guys' thoughts on this one, so please comment below to let me know what your interpretations are. I am, however, going to speak about the snake, as it appears in every segment of the film. In spring, the boy sees a snake when he's picking herbs. Upon noticing the snake, he exhibits no fear and throws the snake away. This may be an indication of the boy's innocence, as he is unaware of the danger a snake may represent. In summer, the teenage monk sees 2 snakes mating. This is used to reflect his growing sexual maturity and desire. In autumn, a snake is seen swimming out from the boat on which the old monk burns himself. This can signify one of 3 things: rebirth, transformation, or immortality. Lastly, in winter, we see a snake nesting in the temple. This may potentially signify the closing and the beginning of a cycle, as represented by the endless snake constantly eating its own tail. Now, let's focus on the old monk. The old monk is seen as a mentor to the young monk, teaching him valuable life lessons and providing him with insights and guidance during moments of crisis. He seems to have understood the essence of life and is on his way to nirvana. However, he holds one last earthly attachment, which is his care for the young monk. This is evident in the scene where the adult monk leaves with the policeman. We see the boat being stuck motionless in the water despite the constant paddling. It is only after the old monk waves a final goodbye to his mentee that the bow is set free from its invisible hold, implying that the old monk has finally released his last attachment. Before setting himself alight, the old monk writes Chinese characters on 5 pieces of paper and uses them to cover his eyes, mouth, and ears. The character written is the traditional Chinese character of Bi, which means close. This action bears similarities to the 3 wise monkeys, which embodies the proverb, see no evil, hear no evil, speak no evil. Or it could be symbolic of the old monk's desire to turn away from his bodily senses and go inward. When the adult monk returns to the temple, he digs a hole and digs out the sarira of his mentor. Sarira, or 舍利子 in Chinese, commonly refers to the bead-shaped objects that are found among the cremated ashes of Buddhist spiritual masters. They are often taken as evidence of the master's enlightenment and spiritual purity. This may suggest that the old monk has indeed reached nirvana and is now free from the endless cycle of suffering. Another prominent symbol used throughout the film is the seemingly useless door. It has no real function as it is not attached to a wall, allowing anyone to simply walk around it. However, the door is respectfully opened, walked through, and closed when crossing a threshold, until the arrival of the girl, where the teenage monk walks around the door in order to be with her, breaking his own moral principles and spiritual beliefs. Another instance that demonstrates this is the stone statue the girl sits on. In this instance, the teenage monk tells her off, saying the old monk will be cross with her. However, after they've been intimate, he brings her the stone statue voluntarily. Again, demonstrating that his values and Buddhist principles have taken a backseat to his desire. Therefore, we can see the door as a symbol of one's beliefs and principles. It may also represent Buddhism itself, where it is regarded as a philosophy to life rather than a rigid rule one is forced to follow. Next, let's talk about the duality of objects. In the beginning of the film, we see the older monk discarding a poisonous herb picked up by the boy monk. The boy doesn't see the difference, saying the 2 herbs look the same to him, to which the old monk explains, there's a thin white line at the tip differentiating the 2. One herb can save lives, whereas the other is deadly. This thin white line is symbolic of the separation between dualities. For example, the dagger the adult monk uses to kill his wife is a murder weapon, a tool of violence. However, we later see the adult monk use the exact same dagger to shave his head and carve out the Heart Sutra. In this case, it is a tool through which he uses to find himself again. Another example is the rock that was tied to little animals by the boy monk. In this instance, it is an unwarranted burden that causes death, whereas at the end of the film, it is used as a method of repentance. One detail that is easily missed is the name of the temple. The words 人生安 is written on the plaque of the door in front of the lake. 人生 translates to life, and an translates to temple. Therefore, the temple and the movie is a metaphor to what one may experience in the cycle of life. Which also explains why all the characters in the film remain nameless throughout, for their anonymity serve as a representation for everyone and anyone. Spring comes back again as the last segment of the film, where we see the boy repeating the similar action of putting rocks in little animals' mouths. This marks the beginning of another cycle. It also makes us wonder whether the old monk himself had done the same when he was just a boy, suggesting that life is an endless cycle bound to repeat itself over and over again. Thank you so much for being here with me. Let me know your thoughts on the film in the comments below, and see you in the next one. Bye.